Hello, I'm Joel Blackford with Beth Hassid Sabbath Fellowship at 1631 Ford Parkway in St. Paul, Minnesota. We meet every Sabbath from 11:30 a.m. to sunset. Please join us this Passover, this Friday night. That would be April 19th. And please enjoy Passover with some place across the world, wherever you happen to be. Enjoy Passover. Jesus kept Passover. If he did that and you want to be more like him, then keep Passover like he did. And first fruits is when he resurrected. So just keep that in mind too. Okay, we're not going to talk about the 3 days of darkness much. I'm going to mention it in passing because there's so many crazy people out there right now. One guy stopped by our place last week and said, my first name is Prophet. So, And yeah, that was his first name basically. And he said, on Passover, that time frame, we will have the 3 days of darkness, and then right after that, 40 days after that, the rapture. Well, you know what? A lot of things need to happen, and so obviously he's a false prophet, even though that's his first name. And there's many other ones out there too. Keep in mind that the man that started this out would have been a Catholic gentleman who we really can't trust in this case. Then the person after that is Prophet Ezra. We'll call him from Israel. And his wife even says he's a liar. So all the people so far that are hitting the internet and going crazy about the 3 days of darkness are false prophets. So just keep that in mind. Now, there will be the fifth bowl way at the end of the Great Tribulation, closer to 5 or 6 years later, and that would be 3 days of darkness or some time frame of darkness, and that makes sense. And that's very similar to Egypt, where that was the 9th plague. This would be the 5th of the bowls, which would be like the 8th overall plague. So just keep that in mind. 8th of when you include the 3 woes plus the 7 bowls, which are 10. So they're very similar to Egypt at that point in time. So just keep that in mind as you're hearing all these crazy prophecies out there like this one, which is that you have roving bands of rabbis running around cutting off Christians' heads because they don't keep the Noahide laws. Now, look at the Ten Commandments on one side, look at the Noahide over here, the 7, and they're very, very similar. In fact, they're all good things. You should believe in God. You should respect God and praise Him. Respect human life. Respect the family. There's nothing bad in any of this. A good judicial system. All of these things are good. And so, obviously, these people are lying about Noahide. They're trying to get YouTube views. They're trying to stir you up thinking that rabbis, yes, they comment, and they read the commentaries on Sanhedrin, the Babylonian Talmud. I think it's 58b. They do look at that, but there are contradictory opinions there. One passage says, yes, they're supposed to keep the Noahide, and you obviously get to kill them if they don't, but nobody keeps that, obviously. And then on the other hand, the next passage says, but if people will study the Torah, then they're tzaddiks, they're great people, so they're applauding Christians for studying the Bible. So keep in mind, this is not going to happen. We're not going to discuss this tonight either. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the blame game, which is Macron in France. We just had the fire at Notre Dame, and he's trying to blame somebody rather than himself. He has caused many of the problems in France right now, and the finger never gets pointed back at the idiots that caused the problems. It's always pointed at, say, the Yellow Vest protesters, maybe America for that matter, and eventually they'll get to the Jews. They always blame somebody. Macron has caused this problem where we now have Notre Dame burned, but I'm saying it's part of a 770-year prophecy, and it had to occur this time. So just keep that in mind. We'll look at the prophecy, and with Macron, who cares what he has to say? This happens to be this area where they burned something 777 years ago, and I'll get to that in a little bit. It's called the Place de Grève, and this is an 1855 picture. You see Notre Dame behind it there, so it's all part of this courtyard on an island there in Paris. And so it's very beautiful. There's a hotel to the left, and this was where the wealthy people hung out. So this is Notre Dame. It was founded groundbreaking in 1163. It was completed in 1345. That's a long time ago, people. And then during Passover of 2019, exactly 777 years after an event, it was burned. And I'm saying it's part of a prophecy. It's classic European architecture. It's a beautiful facility. Notice the cross at the end there? That's about the only thing that really survived from the fire, which is very interesting. So the most important thing survives. The frieze architecture on the outside is very weird looking. This is a scene of the judgment at the end of days. That is the angel Michael on the left-hand side, and that's Satan on the right, and he's holding in his hand the balances. That means judgment. And so obviously you would want the greater weight to be on your side, that you are judged as going into heaven, so to speak. So it's very interesting. There are many friezes, and we'll be discussing those during this video today. This is a picture of the fire. You can see the bell towers behind, and then you can see where the fire started. We know that somebody caused this. You may hear Macron say, oh, well, we'll blame the yellow vest, but we think it wasn't arson. Well, it was, because they have film of somebody wandering around up there in a special garb, and we know who that person would be in terms of his belief system. And we also know that back in 2016, they found a car out in front of Notre Dame with gasoline in it and ignition materials, and they knew that they were planning on burning it. And also, we've had 2 churches burned every week for a period of time now in France. So we've had, nearly 1,000 churches burned down or defecated on or destroyed. And we know who the vandals are. We know this is a consistent theme over in France. And France is falling apart because they won't enforce the laws. I'm saying fire begets fire 777 years later. Look at that spire falling. And I'll show you another picture later on that will compare to something else. Things are falling apart. Now, let's look at the prophetic history of this, and then I'll give you the 777 years ago what that prophecy was. So first, the Jews have been revered as kings and reviled as beggars across Europe for 2,000 years. That Notre Dame, Jewish connection. So there's the conflicts going on there, and of course it's in Paris, and of course Paris has been a hotbed for many, many things. The Jewish people were both revered as progenitors of the Christian faith and reviled as blind schemers who betrayed Jesus and fell from God's grace. Notre Dame's structure depicts those conflicting attitudes towards the Jewish population for centuries past. The west facade is the area where you see most of these friezes that have Jewish parents of Mary, the Virgin Mary, they call her Anne and Joachim, and several scenes are portrayed, including Anne and Joachim's marriage and the rejection of the couple's offering by the high priest due to Anne's barrenness, and then all sorts of other things. The Jews are depicted in the carvings as wearing pointed hats, so you'll see that, and they are royally mandated. That was their dress code for that time frame to distinguish them from the Christian population. This is from the Times of Israel article that's just recently occurred from the 16th of April 2019. Here's the frieze that I was describing, where you've got the Jewish people in there, and when you see the pointy hat, that means that they're Jewish. And so, but everybody was Jewish during these time frames. Mary and Joseph and their parents and everything, everybody was Jewish during that time because it's a Jewish story. So, the Jewish history in Paris is prominently placed above the portals of the Gallery of Kings with its 28 sculptures of ancient Judean rulers believed to have been ancestors of Mary. The kings are not actually the originals. They were taken down and beheaded during the Revolution of 1789 to 99. And so they were put back up again in the 19th century, but there was a trial. So now you're going to see part of the prophecy. Back in 1240, the church, the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, put on trial the Talmud documents. So there's the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, and the Talmud, which is commentary on that. That would be like your pastor's sermons, if you wanted to archive them. Well, they would want to burn those because the Catholic Church was burning many things that were not written in, say, Latin or just things that they found offensive. So in this case, they found it to be blasphemous. Okay, fine. So they get confiscated and then they burn in 1242 all of the Talmuds that they could find, which is many, 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 right there at Place de Grève, which is the square right by Notre Dame, and that is 777 years ago. Sevens are huge in the Bible. It's cited 57, 58 times in Revelation, and 7, Sabbath, and it's everywhere in the Bible, people. Okay, so let's look at one of the friezes and describe it first before you see it. There is a frieze that shows the figures of ecclesia, which would be the church. That's how it's written. Ecclesia is in this case, a Latin word or a French word, but it's also Greek, very similar in Greek. And so that would be really more, it would be the congregation of people. It wouldn't be a building, it wouldn't be a church, but that's how it was translated because King Jimmy wanted it translated as church so he could build buildings and get paid for it. So synagogue is the Jewish lady. So there are two different women. Synagogue is depicted as a simple, downtrodden, defeated, and blindfolded woman to signify Judaism's irrelevance. Ecclesia is majestic, confident, often depicted with a crown, chalice, and other Christian symbols. The synagogue has a snake as a blindfold, a fallen crown at her feet. She has a broken staff in one hand, and then slipping from her hand almost are the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. There's the pictures, or rather the friezes. And so on the right-hand side, you have the ecclesia, which would be confident and powerful. And then you have these downtrodden Jews and the snake around her head, and she's blind, and you can just see everything like that. So this is Jew versus the Cairo, the Christians. And it's horrible, but that's exactly how Europe has been towards the Jews for 2,000 years. They hate the Jews. So what do they depict? Jews suckling on pigs. Others, yeah. Oh, it's exciting. They've had it literally carved into the stone, all of the Semitism, anti-Semitism, over all these thousands of years. Everywhere, this is Wittenberg of Germany, where Luther hated the Jews. He wrote his treatise on the Jews and their lies, and he hated them so badly. He said, kill them and burn them, kill them and burn them. Here's another scene, suckling on a boar, checking out its rectum. This is Wittenberg, Germany, home of Luther, because they believed Luther was accurate. So the 777-year blessing is, first of all, God said to Abraham, get yourself out of this country and away from your kinsmen and away from your father's house and go to the land which I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, but I will curse anyone who curses you. And by you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. So obviously, if France blesses the Jews, they will be blessed. But 777 years later, after they burn their books, they are cursed. And their building, their Notre Dame, is burned. Consider all the persecution of the Jews from Germany and France over the last 2,000 years. Now think about the wars that have occurred due to their curses. God blesses those that bless his people. It just happens time and time again. It may take 777 years, but God blesses those that bless his people, and he curses those with wars, and now this building. Fire begets fire. It may take a long time, 777 years, to notice the curses, but it happens. And keep in mind the Antichrist will rule from Germany, and France will pay for that too. So God is 777 years long suffering. This is from Exodus 34. It's the 13 attributes of God, and so it is Moses meeting with God after Israel sins, and so we see how long-suffering God is because he's described that way. So Adonai descended in the cloud, stood with Moses there, and pronounced the name of Adonai. Adonai passed before him and proclaimed, Yud-K, Vav-K, Yud-K, Vav-K twice, is God. Adonai is God, merciful and compassionate, slow to anger, incredibly slow to anger, rich in grace and truth, showing grace to the 1,000th generation, forgiving offenses, crimes, and sins, yet not exonerating the guilty, but causing the negative effects of the parents' offenses to be experienced by their children and their grandchildren, 777 years later even, and by the 3rd and 4th generations, even Moshe. Then at once Moshe bowed his head to the ground and prostrated himself. 777, all of these sevens are huge. As I mentioned, Revelation's coated with sevens. And so Judah ben Samuel was born in 1140, died in 1217. He had the 10 last prophecies of the Jubilees, and he lived 77 years of age, and he was a great, great man of that time frame in Germany, Speyer, Germany. Then Shlomo Goren, so his name would mean peace, threshing floor. Okay, that's what his name means. Shlomo Goren. He lived to be 77 years of age. He blew the shofar after the 6-day war and read the Torah up on the Temple Mount. And so just keep in mind these guys that with the sevens in their ages and with the 777s and things like that, they're huge in terms of God's economy. Okay, so once again, 2019 minus 1242 equals 770 years of long suffering. So this is a different article that I'd like you to look at, and this is an older article from 2013, but the Day in Jewish History from 1242. France burns all known copies of the Talmud. And so one excommunicated Jew shared his complaints about the Talmud with the Pope, and that kicked it all off. So that's June 17th of 1242 was the day when they met and they started to burn the copies. Okay, it was a big bonfire of 24 wagons. It was huge, people. And so this is Tammuz 5002, 10 Tammuz, which would be 7 days before the Dire Straits, but it's pretty close to that. On this day, the orders of both the Pope and the French king, all known existing copies of the Talmud, not the Torah, the Talmud, were burned. 24 wagons again, copies of this multi-volume work. And keep in mind, this is a big bonfire, but these are all handwritten copies. We won't see the Gutenberg press for a period of time here until more the 1500s. So the apostate Jew, Nicholas Donin, really sold them out. And so he had been excommunicated by his community in the year 1229. And so he listed all the complaints about the Talmud and got them all in trouble. According to the Roman Catholic Church, and keep in mind, the Jews are the sons of Jacob, and the Roman Catholic Church, according to the Jews, the Orthodox Jews, is Edom, Esau, the brother of Jacob that hated his brother and wanted him dead and tried to figure out a way to kill him. And so they are eternal enemies in many ways. Among the Jews, the Talmud, which is comprised of the Mishnah, the 3rd century Common Era compendium of law, as interpreted by the rabbis, and the Gemara, the 6th century work of the commentary of the Mishnah, and other subjects. It's also referred to as the oral law. So the written law is the Torah, the oral law is these compendiums. And so they hold these works in high regard. They see the contradictions in them, the Orthodox Jews do, but they don't want to admit that to Christianity because then you'll burn their books. So they feel that it's divinely inspired, and it isn't, but they're not willing to argue that point publicly. Okay, so the problem is that Donin made the claim that they were superseding the Bible for the Jews, and so they were, according to Augustine, they were supposed to bear the responsibility of upholding the Old Testament to provide living proof of the truth of the New Testament. And so Jews don't want to do that, but that's what the Roman Catholic Church said they were supposed to do. So they were supposed to not give precedence to the oral law, and no longer, they would then, if they didn't, they would no longer fulfill their historic role, and they would no longer be candidates for conversion, and no longer warranted the protection of the Roman Catholic Church. So they listed their arguments against the Talmud. They claimed that they blasphemed Jesus and Mary. They attacked non-Jews in their writings, and so they determined to start burning these books eventually. But they started on March 3rd of 1240 to work on this while the Jews were at prayer, and then they brought these books into that area right by Notre Dame and burned them. And so there was a trial for the Talmud from 1240 forward, and then finally they burned 10,000 volumes of these manuscripts, a startling number when it was all written by hand, as I mentioned, and they wanted to burn it because of offensive passages. They concluded they were offensive. So this was that Place de Grève in Paris, and one rabbi described it as, "My tears formed a river that reached to the Sinai desert and the graves of Moshe and Aaron. Is there another Torah to replace the Torah which you have taken from us?" This is from the magazine Haaretz, which is the land in Hebrew. I want to tell you where things are in Paris, just so you have a working idea of what's going on. On the left-hand side is the Eiffel Tower. In the middle is this place where not Napoleon, but where the French Revolution occurred, and they beheaded so many people. That's the Place de la Concorde, and then way off to the right is the Notre Dame fire, and that's lower right. So keep that in mind. This is Paris, and this is how close things are together. Another massacre. St. Bartholomew's massacre. 10,000 people were killed. These are French Huguenots, which were Calvinists, and they were predestined to die. That's a joke. So from August 23rd to 24th, during that time of St. Bartholomew's birthday in 1572, the French Catholics murdered Protestants. But it was typical during that time frame, during the 1500s. The Roman Catholics and the Pope wanted to kill all the Protestants off, and it caught fire. So then by 1789 through 1799, they killed 40,000 people due to the French Revolution, and they really tried to kill God too. They lost their faith during that time, and that's why France has so many problems today. They have had many holocausts throughout France and Germany and Europe. Once again, I will bless those that bless you, and I will curse those that curse you. and they have been cursed with these Holocausts and other deaths and wars throughout Europe all these thousands of years. Luther has caused many problems because he wrote this treatise, of the Jews and their lies, many, many years ago. And so to celebrate his birthday in Germany, they started Kristallnacht in 1938. That was starting the Holocaust. And once again, Luther portrays the Jews as suckling on pigs and inspecting their rectums, and he mocked them. He said, kill them and burn them, kill them and burn them, kill them and burn them. And Luther caused another Holocaust. Now, I'd like to mention, since we're talking about Lutherans, that I have a personal story on this that I'd like to share with you. Back in the 2000s, I was attending a Lutheran church because I'm a good singer and I enjoyed their large choir. So I attended this very large congregation, 9,000 members, and in 2009 we had one vote. And many 100-member congregations had one vote on a big issue during that year. And so this happens to be that church too. So during this time frame, I'm saying that they will be blessed and cursed. And so one pastor was blessed, but some of the pastors were cursed. And I'm going to show you how this relates to that. So the pastor on the left was a good pastor. He preached repentance. And back in 1972, our church, that church, had, by the way, I never joined it. I was never a Lutheran. So anyway, he preached a message. He woke up Easter morning and he said, Jesus resurrected, and he started to preach that plus repentance. And he was blessed by that. The church grew to 9,000 people. Then the guy on the right-hand side stabbed him in the back during a meeting over just a simple financial issue, but he was a coward. So the hero, 70% of the ELCA Lutherans don't even believe in the resurrection. This guy finally got it straight, started preaching that, and the church grew. But the coward, they always show up for cowardly actions, but in this case, he didn't show up for this vote, so we'll describe it to you. So the replacement pastor, the new senior pastor, is on the left-hand side, and he came in and made horrific changes to that place. It was a very nice conservative place that believed in the Bible, and he changed all of that up. And you can see him there. He got cancer, and he died as a result of that. He received the curse of what he did. And then the guy on the right-hand side is their new senior pastor, and he's a toady. He was just a horrible toady. And so there are blessings and curses for these guys. So what I noticed back in 2009 as that transition occurred and the good guy was kicked out and the new guys came in is that there was supposed to be a vote in August of 2009. And this is an article by John Piper, The Tornado, the Lutherans, and Homosexuality, where they were going to vote on having homosexual pastors. And so during this time frame, Piper was right down the road at Bethlehem Baptist, and so he was noticing that the skies were beautiful that day in August. And then suddenly a tornado came along and it hit the convention center, it hit their tents, it hit the steeple of the church nearby, Central Lutheran, and it just did horrific damage very, very quickly. So this is from Piper's article. According to the ELCA's printed convention schedule at 2 o'clock on Wednesday, August 19th, the fifth session of the convention was to begin. The main item of the session was consideration, proposed social statement on human sexuality. The issue was whether practicing homosexuality is a behavior that should disqualify a person from pastoral ministry. The eyewitness of the damage continues. The curious tornado touches down just south of downtown and follows 35W right due north there straight towards the city center. It crosses I-94. It's now downtown. That's 2 o'clock. And it hits the Minneapolis Convention Center, the Central Lutheran building. It severely damages the convention center roof, shreds the tents, breaks off the steeple, and splits what's left of the steeple in two. Then it lifts and suddenly goes away. It came as fast as it left. There is the split, there is the steeple, there is what happened, and the vote, based on us losing the good pastor and getting in this cowardly man, plus the horrible other leaders, our one vote that we had was sold off for probably 30 pieces of silver, and that's what produced a 666, okay, a 666 vote to a 333, okay, so 2/3 of the people voted for gay pastors. And then the mystery tornado hit. Now these ELCA Lutherans, they said, oh, this is a gift from God because nobody was lost, nobody died. No, tornadoes that come out of no place after a 66.6% vote for something that should never occur, that's a sign from God. You know what it is. So that was on 8/19 of 2009, and I happened to be nearby, and I noticed all of this, and I didn't understand what was going on. I knew about the vote, but I didn't know that the one cowardly pastor that pulled the E2 Brute on the good pastor, that he had sold his vote off, and he was too cowardly to even vote. But that's what produced that weird effect, that 666. Okay, so I want to compare it. Let's go back just so you can see it one more time. That's from Central Lutheran, from the tornado, and this is the Notre Dame curse as they lose their spire on the cathedral on April 15th of 2019. Very, very interesting. So just keep this in mind. There are blessings and curses. Um, the EU could collapse if Germany and France do not begin to listen to the people's concerns. So just keep that in mind. There are blessings and curses related to how you treat God's people. So keep in mind, Passover is coming up very, very quickly, and so I'd like you to celebrate that. Keep what Jesus kept. He kept Passover. He was the Passover lamb. So please go someplace. You can come to our place if you want to, but go someplace, celebrate Passover in the best way you can, in some way to remember Jesus' sacrifice. The seals are opening. I don't know how this relates to April 15th and the burning in Paris, but just keep in mind the seals are opening. I believe we're waiting for the fourth seal. They're linear. And then that's the end of the video. So thank you very much for your time. God bless. Bye-bye.